On July 28th, Six Flags Great Adventure finally unveiled the real name for Project Purple, Bakunawa, which is a Filipino mythical sea monster that is known for causing rain, earthquakes, and eating the moon, if I have that understood correctly. Obviously, we already knew a lot about what this layout entailed for this coaster, as track work is already complete, but it is nice to finally get confirmation that the trains will in fact be spinning, and to finally get a name and people can finally relax that it's not going to be called Phantom Spire or Gargantuan Vertical Vengeance. I can't believe people actually thought this thing was going to be called Gargantuan Vertical Vengeance. It got to the point where the park was literally trolling people over that name before this thing was announced. Anyway, I just wanted to jump on real quick and discuss my overall thoughts on this ride, what it means for Great Adventure's future, how exactly it fits in the lineup, and talk about some of the concerns that I already see being brought up about this ride online. Jumping right into it, let's start off with the name, Bakunawa. As soon as that shipping container showed up at the park as part of the teaser campaign, I knew this ride was going to have some sort of sea monster theme, and after copious searching online, I really couldn't find one that seemed to fit what they were going for here. So I had never heard of Bakunawa until now, but hey, it works. This also joins the Cedar Fair collection of roller coasters of mythical monsters that are pretty hard to pronounce. But at the end of the day, I don't really think it's that big of a deal. Who really cares if the GP don't know how to pronounce a ride, aside from us very easily bothered enthusiasts? Which I'm not one of, by the way. You can say the word Valraven however you want. Just don't put the in front of it. So I think the name is good, but the logo for this ride is absolutely phenomenal. It's gonna look great on a t-shirt. I absolutely love the design of this purple monster, I love the font of the lettering, and I love how the tail looks like the actual spire of the coaster. Then finally, I think you can make an absolutely sick Cedar Fair style ride entrance with this thing. I kind of think what they have with Leviathan up at Canada's Wonderland. How they have that big 3D logo kind of sitting in its own entrance plaza in front of the ride that you kind of walk around to get into the entrance. Doing something like that with this logo would go absolutely hard, and I really hope they pull that off. Kind of disappointed I haven't seen anybody ask the question for what the entrance is going to look like for this thing yet. Now jumping into the ride experience, I have the pleasure of having Great Adventure as one of my home parks, so I've had the fortunate opportunity to visit the park during various phases of construction. And just seeing this thing come together piece by piece and the mystery of it all is honestly probably part of the reason why I've done such a 180 on this ride. Yes, I'll admit, I was not the biggest fan of this concept when it first got leaked. I just thought it didn't really make any sense to replace King Ka. I was probably a little warmer on it than most people were, but I definitely was a proponent of let's just add a few more elements to the front of this thing in addition to the stall and the spike, and that just will make this feel like a much more complete ride and a real enhancement of what Ka was. But seeing this thing get built and the animations come out, I just can't hate on this thing anymore. It's going to be absolutely incredible. Launching upside down on a giant stall while spinning is just going to be absolutely mental, and then hanging off the side of a 380-foot tower looking straight down while also spinning and super exposed, and then falling down is also just going to be absolutely insane. This ride is just going to be filled with unique, first-of-a-kind sensations. Bakunawa will also have Mac's first ever floorless spinning coaster trains. With your feet dangling and only a lap bar to secure you, you're going to feel so exposed, especially hanging off the side of a 380-foot tower. That was such a nice surprise for me when I first read the announcement for this thing. I have yet to do one of these Mac Extreme spinners, and this does project to be my first because I don't plan on riding Ride to Happiness or Time Traveler within the next year. But anyway, I'm just so stoked just to experience that in addition to a 380-foot tall tower. I also think they really nailed the profiling of the 380-foot tall tower. Having that huge section that is just a 90 degrees straight up is going to result in a really nice pop of airtime going up and coming down from the spiral. I'm talking about this little curved section of track right here. In the back car coming down the spiral, that is going to absolutely send you flying. I am very curious to see how hard that moment ends up hitting in terms of airtime, because that's really the only opportunity I see for this ride to have any airtime. Another thing I really like this ride seems to accomplish, or at least it does in the animations, is that the whole train appears to really get to that Outer Bank steep angle. You kind of get to it quickly as you get to the top of the tower, then the whole train is Outer Banked as you kind of wind up that spiral. I think that's huge for this ride, because if not, you really would have had people fighting to get on that first car to get as high up the spike as possible. But I think in the last car of this ride, you're still going to get that Outer Bank hanging over the side feeling that you should get. When it comes to this ride not being a full circuit, honestly, other than capacity, I really don't see a reason why it has to be full circuit. At the end of the day, I think your trip down the tower would have been near identical to your trip up the tower, except the park would have been spending double the money on track to take you back to the station. I think the cost savings here of going with a shuttle for a ride like this is totally worth it, especially if you're going to do the dual switch track to add some extra capacity. The way I see it, in theory, if this was a full circuit coaster, descending the tower would have been a near identical experience to the ascent, except it would have required additional track and supports. This way, they are just being resourceful by reusing the same track twice, since it offers basically the same exact experience as any added descent track would have. Like I said, I think the only real benefit would have been capacity. Now, my original pitch that would have improved Project Purple back when it was just a concept was to basically leave the station, do a few elements, then glide over a switch track, and then go into the stall and the tower. Then after you pass over that switch track and into the stall, the switch track then switches, and then on the return, then you go into the brake run. Here is a SketchUp I made in about 5 minutes to depict this a little bit better for you guys. This was the original idea I had to improve the mock tower coaster and make it have a bit more of a full circuit feel. You would launch out of the station, go through a couple full circuit elements, then glide over the track switch into the stall and tower, which would stay as a shuttle, but on the return trip, the track switches and takes you back to the back of the station for the brake run. This is basically a cheater way to keep the stall and the tower, which are the longest parts of the ride, as shuttles, so you traverse them twice, while technically making the ride a full circuit coaster and having the capacity of a full circuit coaster in theory. Also notice that track switch number 2 is only to get the train turned around to enter the station in the same direction it left. That's kind of what they're doing at the very beginning of Fast and Furious Hollywood Drift in Orlando that they are constructing right now. When you look at it from a cost perspective, I don't think it would have been that unrealistic. The 2 elements and the extra launch would have costed a bit more, but your launch 1 that's currently there now could have been shortened by a lot. LSM fins can brake you at a faster speed than they can accelerate you, so I think shortening the launch 1 would be okay here because the ride could still provide enough brake force to slow you down enough before you hit the switch track. And you would have been able to get rid of the double loading station. I think going to something like this would have also improved the ride overall a lot by just giving it a couple more full circuit elements, ride to happiness style. At the end of the day, I am an engineer and I'm always looking for ways to improve my coasters while keeping cost in mind, so those should really just be viewed as a minor nitpick, and I'm just still so excited for this ride, even for what it is and without those couple full circuit elements at the beginning. Now, I've mentioned capacity a lot in this video, which is often a concern for shuttle coasters and a concern that many people have now. So I want to kind of dive into it and figure out exactly what capacity could look like for this ride. To start doing that math, we need to figure out exactly what the minimum cycle time is for Bakunawa. The park claims that this ride will take 137 seconds, and that is the most ridiculous and shameless number I've ever seen a park try to sell for a ride's duration. I mean, the official animated POV is only 1 minute and 3 seconds long, so what, you're just going to sit on the switch track for another 2 minutes? That's a recipe for a great capacity, let me tell you. Now, looking at the actual animated POV and trying to get a guesstimate for ourselves, the cycle time from when you first pick up speed to when you return to the switch track and park is exactly 1 minute and 3 seconds. Now, one thing I love to see off the bat is that you launch directly from the switch track in the station and out onto the layout. I thought there might have been a chance that you actually pull out of the station onto the launch fins before you actually start taking off and picking up speed, but the fact that you launch right out of the station is huge in terms of reducing cycle time. Had you pulled out of the station onto the launch, stopped again, and then launch, you're probably looking at 15 seconds added per cycle, which may not seem like a lot, but for capacity on a coaster like this, that is huge and can probably move you 200 riders per hour. That leads me into a big point I have about this ride's capacity, which is that the programming here is going to be absolutely key. We're already off to a good start with the train launching directly out of the station, but the programming for how fast the switch track is going to move and how quickly the train can park once it returns to the station are all going to be huge capacity savers. I have a little bit of background in the controls industry, and let me tell you, nothing pisses me off more than when rides have crappy programming. Like for example, Iron Gwazi taking 30 seconds to get from the holding brake run to the station. That is just really bad programming and ride design. And with bad programming, you are wasting precious time on every single cycle over and over again, no matter how fast attendants are checking restraints. So to help Bakunawa's capacity, the programmers have to nail the launch sequencing, the parking in the station, and then probably most importantly, how fast the switch track can move. Now, a lot of that has to do with how much money the park and Mac were willing to spend on getting a motor for this guy, because, well, the switch track can only move as fast as the motor allows it. But before we get to that, it does appear from the animated POV that this train is able to park pretty quickly. So again, good programming here will be key to save as much time as possible. Now for the minimum interval, we're going to assume as soon as the train parks, the switch track can move and welcome the next train on the launch track. So how do we get an exact guesstimate of how fast the switch track can move? Well, let's consult our good friend Mr. Freeze that also employs this exact same switch track technology. Now in this video, from when the dispatch button is pressed by the operator to when the train launches, it is about 20 seconds, roughly. Now the switch track moves pretty fast, but thanks to non-ideal programming, the train kind of sits there for a while waiting to launch. Hopefully Bakunawa features improved programming that can cut down on this time a little bit more, like more to 15 seconds, but for now, we'll use the 20-second switch track time. So that brings Bakunawa's minimum interval to 1 minute and 23 with perfect operations, in my estimation. 1 minute and 23 is a very reasonable interval for a good crew of attendants to hit, and this ride will have to have a good crew. There is simply no alternative with this ride's popularity and capacity. The 1 minute and 23 minimum dispatch interval, about 43 dispatches an hour are possible. Multiplying that number by 20 for this ride's 20 passenger trains, that gets us a capacity of 860 riders per hour. Obviously, that number is not completely desirable, and you want it to be higher for a ride that will be this popular, but I've seen some people online claiming as low as 600 to 500, but that simply simply just not true. If operated correctly and with good programming, this ride will be able to keep its line moving. Actually, capacity-wise, it's quite comparable to what I think will be this ride's main competition in my rankings, Top Thrill 2, which also has a capacity of 800 riders per hour. And do I really hear people say, I don't really feel like riding Top Thrill 2 today because the capacity is not good enough? Nope. Never hear it, and it's going to be the same case for this ride. Now, the other element to this ride's capacity that I want to touch on is how easy it will be for the crew to hit the minimum interval dispatch time. One thing that always bogs down ride capacity when I'm at a park is guests putting their loose articles on the opposite side of the platform, but good news, we were told at the announcement event that there will be free double-sided lockers and no loose articles will be allowed on the platform, so that will help crews hit the minimum interval dispatch time consistently. Another big factor for capacity these days is how well these trains can accommodate people of larger size. The more people it can accommodate, the less slowdown of operation will occur because it will be less people having to get up or get squeezed by the ride operators to try to fit. So obviously that helps speed up operations quite a bit. Now, one drawback I see in terms of helping the crew out is that the actual switch tracks for this ride, unlike Mr. Freeze that we showed earlier, are actually mechanically tied together. On screen right now, you can see that Mr. Freeze starts with both trains in the loading position, and then it's able to slide one into the launch track while the other stays in the loaded position. Bakunawa will not be able to do this. As you can see in this photo, the two load tracks are actually connected physically by this purple bar right here. This means essentially is when a train returns from the course, it will have to sit in the launch position until the train on the other load side is ready to go. Once the train in load is ready, it will slide into the launch position at the same exact time as the other train slides into the unload position to unload its riders. This will create some kind of funny situations where you return to the station after completing the ride, and you're just kind of sitting chilling there looking at your friends in the station next to you while you wait for the other side to finish loading. You'll be oh so close, yet so far away. Now, this in theory shouldn't be a problem if interval dispatch is being met, but let's say if there is a slowdown on one side of the station, in my opinion, the train returning from the launch should be able to independently slide over to its load station, just like Mr. Freeze does, to give that crew a head start and make their lives easier for hitting the next minimum interval dispatch. Tying the tracks together like that just makes it harder on the crews in certain scenarios to hit minimum interval dispatch, and it's really frustrating to me because these two tracks are definitely tied together because of cost savings. And that's really the only preventable capacity issue I see so far with this ride. The other remaining capacity issues are all just due to the nature of the ride, having somewhat smaller trains and having a longer ride interval. Now, obviously, there are other factors in play that we won't be sure about until the ride opens. For example, where will Fastlane merge? How will this ride handle exit passes? How will they keep the ride staffed? Will staff be able to handle both load stations, kind of like how they do on Mr. Freeze, or will they have to independently staff each side, which could potentially lead to them closing one side on non-busy days? These are all things that we will find out, but overall, I think the capacity here is far from terrible, and people are making a much bigger stink of it than it necessarily is. At the end of the day, it is very similar to Top Thrill 2, and nobody complains about that one. Now, for the final segment of this video, I just want to talk about what this ride means for the bigger Great Adventure picture and how it will affect their ride lineup. For this, I'm throwing it all the way back to the first ever YouTube video I ever made where I mathematically ranked park lineups. Obviously, it goes without saying that this ride provides a huge boost to the Great Adventure lineup, and in my opinion, is currently projecting to be the second best coaster at the park, and around the 60-ish range in the world, which is where Top Thrill 2 currently lives. Using my ranking method, this ride will give the park a nice 7 to 8 point boost and catapult it over where it originally was back when it had King Ka. And that would put this park firmly back in the conversation as a Tier 2 park along with Hershey Park, Kings Island, and Canada's Wonderland. If you have no idea what I'm talking about, I have a website linked in my description that goes to my park rankings, and you can kind of view it from there and get a feel for how it works. And oh yeah, I almost grazed over it. King Ka. As you probably know by now, this ride does not take up any of the former land used by King Ka. Now, don't jump to conclusions. That does not mean that this ride and King Ka were ever planned to exist at the same time. I just don't think that's the case. This ride, by every means necessary, is the spiritual successor to King Ka. Not the physical one, because it's not occupying the land, but it's absolutely the spiritual one, and gets back to filling that hole the Great Adventure needed of having a super tall roller coaster in its lineup. What I love about this super tall roller coaster in particular is that Great Adventure's two coasters that are the next shortest to this, being Nitro and El Toro, have no inversions and are all airtime focused. So they were able to incorporate an inversion on this super tall coaster. Just a small little nitpick that I really like here. And overall, just looking at this ride experience with the spinning, the stall, the 3 launches, hanging off the side of the tower, I have no doubt in my mind that this will be better than King Ka. I know King Ka kind of has nostalgia working in its favor, and people will say, oh, you can't judge the layout before I ride it. But I mean, I've been doing this for a long time now, and I judge layouts before I ride them all the time, and I have a general feel for what my preferences are and how I'm going to enjoy a ride. Hell, that's usually how I determine my coaster trips, is I look at a POV, a Nova ride's existence, and say, hey, that's something I think I'm going to really like or is going to be an elite coaster. And sure enough, most of the time I go and I ride it, and it is. So just based on the layout and what I'm expecting this ride to be and what I know so far, obviously it's possible it can change, but as of right now, I do fully believe that this will be a better roller coaster and rank higher in my rankings and worldwide than King Ka. However, like I said earlier in the video, the main competition in my rankings, and again, probably worldwide, is going to be Top Thrill 2. I really don't have any idea which I'm going to prefer, and I definitely won't know until I take a ride on this baby next year. So yeah, that's about where my general expectation is with this coaster. I'm very clearly expecting it to be the second best coaster at Six Flags Great Adventure. I think it's going to have a really hard time being the full layout of El Toro, for me at least. Now, what does this ride mean for the future of Six Flags Great Adventure? Well, this year, attendance is already doing a lot better, and the hype for this coaster is very real. Shout out to the Six Flags Great Adventure team for building the hype for this thing like they have, and bringing in all those influencers, which is a genius move and could pay off large dividends in the future. Now, with that being said, it is apparent to just about everybody that this is the first step in what is considered a very long-term plan for this park. This ride very subtly actually expanded the park's area, and the entire Golden Kingdom now, including Ka's original plot, Zumanjaro's original queue line, and all the pathways leading up to it, is just sitting unoccupied and ready for a major addition that I believe it will get sooner rather than later. Just look at the space they left themselves between Bakunawa and El Toro. That's some pretty serious space that you could add something pretty major to. In fact, taking it even further, here's a little rough sketch I just made. The yellow would be all this reopened pathway that was originally part of the Golden Kingdom, and reopening the Wild Walkway. Then that blue and white stripe section would be a ride entrance plaza, and then that red section is all the space you have for a potential new thrill coaster to add to this park's lineup even further. Vekoma Tilt Coaster, anyone? You gotta beat Hershey to that one. How about a full Circuit Giga? How about that RMC ground up hyper hybrid that I really want this park to get? The possibilities are endless. I really don't want to get my hopes up too much, but I really do think a 380-foot tall spinning coaster could really just be the beginning for this park, and I think more is on the way, and I don't think we're going to have to wait too long. Maybe even 2029 or 2030 for them to do something with that Golden Kingdom plot. So yeah guys, it just about wraps up everything I wanted to say about Bakunawa. It has been so much fun following along with this project, and so nice to see a giant structure return to Great Adventure, and I'm just so friggin' excited to give this thing a ride next year, because King Ka, you'll forever have a place in my heart, but I've got a new girlfriend, and it's this thing. I'm just kidding, I'm married to Steel Vengeance, happily married for 8 years. I will not be taking any follow-up questions at this time. Oh, and also, LeBron is a Sixer. If you want to learn more about my roller coaster experiences, such as my full ranking of all my credits, park visits and trip reports, ride counts, force charts, and more, find me on the sites listed in front of you. A link to each will be in the description. Thank you all so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one.